Vladimir Putin says he can sustain his war machine indefinitely, but the Russian consumer seems to think differently. Are Russians cutting back on literal food in order to survive Putin's war economy? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Hit that subscribe and let's talk about this. Plus, this isn't even the worst. Now, Moscow Times is reporting that Russian retail chains are forced to sell off their assets as sales fall and costs rise. Now, I want you to understand how preposterous this is. Remember, Russia is in the face of an inflation crisis, which means these retail chains have never charged more for food. Prices have never been higher for Russian retail. So how on earth are they forced to close stores in that environment? In fact, in a hyperinflationary environment like Russia is fast approaching, retail chain, you should never see someone selling staples have declining sales, right? And yet that's exactly what Russian retail is reporting. Huge sales declines, and that they are simply selling off their assets. And assets in this case are plants, equipment, property, grocery stores themselves are being sold off at a record pace. In fact, there's an 86% surge in the number of retail businesses that are being put up for sale. And they expect that the yearly total will be nearly 3 billion, right? Now, some of these, again, involve non-core assets. So that can include everything from IP to brands to actual manufacturing facilities to any number of things. But the takeaway is that these businesses are cannibalizing their assets. This is not something you do when you are thriving. Again, the analogy I would use is if I was to sit there and be like, hey guys, does anyone want to take a steak and strike gum in exchange for cash? Or I would say, hey, we are actually selling the brand is up for sale, right? All of these things would be moves I would make if I thought that the best days of the business were behind me, right? Obviously, I'm not doing that. So, I think there's a lot of growth for us, but we access the US market. We're not the most sanctioned country on earth, not named North Korea. Now, the retailers claim that they're selling their assets due to shrinking revenues, higher operating costs, and expensive credit. No duh, but this is fascinating because, again, these things almost never occur together, right? Think about it. Higher operating costs means it's harder to hire people. It's expensive. And, well, when it's expensive to hire new people, that means that the average person is earning a bigger salary. So they should be spending more. But it's not. They're somehow spending less, and it's still more expensive to hire people to drive your freight or whatever. And, of course, it's even more expensive to get loans, which shouldn't happen in an environment of shrinking revenues. So right there is serious. I'm not saying it's an alert for stagflation in the future. This is definitionally a stagflationary economy. Now, the cope is real, guys. One managing partner at a firm said that many retail chains are facing financial difficulties because shopping mall revenues are down and there's more competition from online marketplaces, which is believable except for things like food and clothes, which, is still wildly unpopular in Russia, right? They can barely get people to do grocery delivery here in the United States, the epicenter of the buy things without leaving your couch universe. And in some cases, you're seeing what is very common in a falling market, which is large retail chains taking stakes in regional competitors. Consolidation is generally the death knell of a market. That's why you see, for example, cable. A lot of these cable companies are just buying each other up, and you're seeing legacy media, right? That there's fewer and fewer owners of legacy broadcast media, and it's because that's the only way. When you can't grow your market, when the market can no longer grow anymore, the only way to improve profitability is to achieve scale. And to do that, you have to take and say, okay, well, me and my competitor, who we've been at war with for years, we both have to run HR departments. So if we merge, well, we won't make any more money, but between the two of us, we'll only have to run one HR department, and that'll buy us more time. So this is a desperation strategy. And what I found really fascinating is actually, let's see if we can find it. Oh, no, it's actually in a different article. Let me talk about this one, okay? So the Russians are actually buying gold just en masse. So I want you to understand what this exactly means. That the Russian consumer is moving away from purchasing groceries and has so little faith in the Russian ruble now that they are hoarding gold, which is, again, seen as an extreme risk asset. Now, here's the line. Retail executive warned in October that Russian consumers are spending less even on groceries, and then the cope as Russians turn towards a savings-oriented mindset. Guys, listen, I'm all about, I think Americans that tighten their belts and save a couple of bucks, good on them. But listen, consumers, if your consumer is spending less on groceries, it means they're getting their asses kicked. And that's true of the U.S. consumer too, by the way. By the time you're cutting back on groceries, it means that you're done with vacations. You're done with going to the movies. You're done with everything else that you can cut, right? Especially, again, if you're a family, the last thing you do as a parent is deprive your kids of food that they love. Trust me, I get, cheese sticks and cream cheese thrown at me on a daily basis. All right. And I still keep giving it to my daughter because, damn, she just loves that stuff. She's a girl who loves cheese. She's after her dad's heart. But this is, again, all of this is a sign, right? And it's not just this. Russians are not buying cars. Guys, Russia is not a country with a robust public transit system, okay? The fact that the Russian auto manufacturers are getting absolutely crushed, a huge stock of unsold vehicles. Even the flagship company, Avtovaz, dropped their vehicle production by nearly 50%, down to just 300,000 new vehicles this year. I mean, you're seeing output down 20% in vehicle and trailer manufacturing. I mean, foreign investors bailing. You can see that this is Russian car output, right? You could see that, yeah, it's sort of rebounded into 2024, but this year it's not going to be able to rebound. It's not. It's falling again. So what was supposed to be a comeback, a story of a economy that's surviving, right? These are Russians who maybe get jobs making shaheds, maybe that families that got their death benefit payment from their soldiers. Well, those families are cooked, and there isn't more money for that new vehicle, right? That new Lada. And there's no way it is, again, normally in a normal country, when your economy slows, wages fall, and you can open up a new plant. So if you're a Chinese manufacturer, you look at Russia and say, what a great place to open a plant. But it's not. Prices are high. Labor costs are high. And there's a real lack of infrastructure. So even the Chinese that would normally say, yeah, we'll open a plant here, are absolutely bailing, right? You can see 2025, they're expecting to actually see total vehicles sold and trucks sold decline year over year. So this is all a really bad sign, right? That the Russian consumer is just beaten to hell, man. I mean, you've got to understand, hoarding gold, like, that's a statement of a total lack of faith. I mean, you've got to understand that when people begin to hold their wealth in currencies other than your own, it represents a real lack of faith, right? Because remember, for a Russian to buy gold, that means they are eschewing not just the ruble, but ruble-denominated assets. They could buy stock in Lukoil. They could buy stock in Gazprom. They could buy, they could spend their money on hard assets like a car, right? They're not doing any of that. They're not even buying groceries. They're hoarding gold. This is a consumer who is almost in total panic, right? Now, of course, the Russian government actually is encouraging this, which is insane. It's insane on the same scale as the Trump administration being like, you know what, U.S. consumer, you should buy cryptocurrency from the president. It's like the president's in charge of the dollar. And the president doesn't even like the dollar, right? It's absurd. So gold exports obviously subject to a huge, oh my God, the government scrapped the VAT on gold bar sales to individuals in 2022. Just fucking brilliant. Yeah, literally. And the government even admitted gold serves the same function that cash once did, including money laundering, and I'm sorry to say, drug trafficking. Yikes, guys. Yikes. And not only that, but even the Russian state is recognizing that the ruble is just not something they want to be stuck holding the bag on, because they are starting to issue domestic bonds in Chinese yuan. Again, the Russian government itself has so little faith in their own ruble that they are taking out debt in Chinese yuan. This is insane. This is like the US government saying, listen, take loans from us, but don't pay us in dollars, pay us in euros. Dude, if the government starts doing that, FYI guys, you should start hoarding gold, okay? So this is all a sign of just like a nightmarish level of dysfunction within the Russian economy. Now, Russia is not a democracy. And this is a fundamental problem, a conundrum, where the Russian consumer doesn't vote. Well, they don't vote in an electoral political sense. And so they don't have the ability to remove Putin from office and replace him with a peacenik, with a peace in our time guy. But the Putin is still threatened by his people. He still needs to maintain a certain critical level of popular support, right? Not electoral victories, not in that sense, but he needs to continue to deliver a base level of prosperity for the Russian people. And we know this because in 2022, Putin activated all of his reserves, which is, of course, the entire Russian male population, because Russia has universal conscription. And when he did that, the flood of people leaving Russia, the outpouring of outrage by the Russian public was so great that he backed off of it and had to pursue this expensive, cumbersome contract soldier policy that he has persisted in for 4 years. But that alone should tell you how sensitive he is to popular support for his regime eroding. And again, this is starting to look like a Russian consumer who is feeling some serious war exhaustion. Anyway, guys, become a member at Combat Vet News, which you can do now by becoming a member at YouTube, right? You see that big old membership button down there? Yeah, you can get access to uncensored combat footage and the Q&As, submit questions, get the shout-outs, and more. It's the best way to support the channel. We'll get you access. Thanks to Alfred Chesky, Alan Nutzing, Christine Schumann, Deborah Oppenheimer, and all of our Lieutenant Tier members. I'll see you guys in the next one. Hit that subscribe. Cheers.